All right, Beth, the great partner, and of course, now Heidi coming up on the ladder since 1998 when we started. We always wanted a nurse tech symposium right from the beginning. So this goes hand to hand, and more importantly, provide the latest data. And actually, it's a great success. When I planned a few months ago, a lot of skepticism whether we'll be able to come out. People are still afraid. But looks like, which I be using a simple word, the COVID is bye-bye. The new life has started. Clearly, we know the numbers in America going down. In India was very peak. Even India is very significantly down from 400,000 to this morning was 62,000. Big drop. So India also kind of reaching there. And more importantly, my own hospital, which Beth mentioned, the EHCC in Jaipur, where I came from, I got 2 days ago from a chief medical officer, Manmeet Kaur, sending that after 15 months in EHCC there was 0 COVID patient. So clearly the COVID is there. Probably it will stay with us in one form or other. Maybe will make us a little more vigilant with the interactions and so, and maybe the mask. I'd say, what is the biggest thing for the mask? There are a lot of negatives you can read. You know, biggest thing is there's no flu. Since we started wearing masks, right? I mean, have you ever seen anybody with the flu? Gone. I think probably whether it's a COVID killed the flu virus or it's the mask, I don't know. I leave it there. But anyway, with that note, and Beth, again, thank you, your leadership with your team, and she showed the glimpses of what we are now with the Newsweek world. You know, they do the report of the various hospitals in cardiology. Mount Sinai, number 5 by the Newsweek few weeks ago, and last year with the US World News we were 6th. We are waiting next month where we are. Let's hope we are climb up further. Okay, with that note, I'll try to present some data of top 10 advances of coronary intervention. I'll try to, maybe a very complex for some of you, but I'll try to make it simple message-wise what we are. As Beth pointed out, Grundtvig is the father of intervention. What we are now, because it started by him. And dream was the catheter-based percutaneous treatment of vascular disease in alert and awake patients. He actually, coined the term, see one, do one, teach one. So that is where we started. He used to do those live workshops, which we are now. We have expanded that. And what I added on top of it is, with utmost safety, appropriateness, and ambulatory. So many patients are being done same day discharge and so. Idea of every year putting the advances together, because field is moving so fast. So we need to come up important advances which are changing our practice. So that basically will be the goal. Now start with imaging. Imaging is we do a lot of in the cath lab. Patient has finally, with all the testings made to the cath lab, we do angiogram, which everyone knows. Simple. But then beyond that, IVUS, look inside the artery. Then we have a OCT, more specific. And then a yellow plaque which gives trouble with the NIRS. And then we do a lot of physiological testings called FFR and IFR. All those add to the one diagnosis and more important management of our cardiac patients. So many studies every year comes to get to the next level, what can be done and so. Now, FFR, IFR is the kind of as embedded in our system, and now we actually have the data that there is a lower mortality if you do FFR guided PCI. This is the data from Sweden, large number of patients, and basically because you identify vulnerable plaque and overall less stent use. So using FFR, decrease mortality. There's another database, same, that individual endpoints are shown here, that FFR guided PCI associated with lower various events as shown here. The question is, what is overall use of FFR? Globally, or particularly we have the data in America. And here now, PCI, is 75% PCI being done with the FFR use. And we know the FFR is very useful and predictive for the future. Second, it is associated with lower mortality. So we have the data even from America. Not Sweden only, America also, lower mortality. Then question comes, you have done the good PCI. You do the FFR, and FFR should be more than 0.9. But you see some patients, even FFR remain less than 0.8, which is the cutoff. 0.8 above is good, less than 0.8 is bad. So can you modify in some of these patients? And this is where we call physiological guided incremental optimization strategy. And basically showed that many patients, despite you do all, that randomization, one, and after, even you change, about 1/4 of patients, you'll not be able to get your FFR of more than 0.9. Some of them still remain less than 0.8, which is significant, like 20%. You say, how can that be? You put a stent, 90% blockade. No, reason is all arteries have minor plaques, and ultimately they decrease the perfusion to the distal vessel. So therefore, stent is one thing, but you need to work on the entire artery by various statins, ACE inhibitors, the beta blockers, and so it needs to go a little more. Now, there is a randomized trial going on to answer that question in 2,000 patients. What about IVUS? IVUS actually routinely used, although now in United States is only like 17%. IVUS, OCT in about 4%. In various countries, IVUS is used in 95%, like Japan. They won't do any PCI without IVUS. But IVUS data actually are very solid, that associated with long-term better outcome. If you do IVUS guided PCI or just do look at the angiogram. It shows, but of course it's a time consuming, the cost, but taken everything together, I think it's a reasonable to do, particularly for patients with a complex anatomy and left main. Then question comes, you do FFR or you do OCT, which one is better? We actually have a trial of a small number of patients, about 300, FFR versus OCT, guidance PCI, and showed that OCT is a little better than FFR. So FFR decrease the stent use, cost effective, but OCT really precisely can identify the lesion which is going to give trouble. So clearly the OCT, because you then optimize your angioplasty results and associate with a better outcome at 13-month follow-up. And so there is a major trial ongoing by one of our earlier fellow who is now at St. Francis in Columbia, called ILLUMINE 4, OCT guided versus angio guided. That will be the final answer to this field. Second, drug-coated balloon. Drug-coated balloon, which is not the drug-eluting stent, but that drug put on the balloon, and they're available by various companies, not available in United States for coronary arteries. It's available for peripheral. And there are many trials now which have looked into this aspect, for the drug-coated balloon, where you should use it, particularly patients who have a drug-eluting stent, whether BMS or DES, that shown that particularly works more for patients with the bare metal stent rather than DES. Your DES restenosis, probably better you put another DES in there rather than drug-eluting balloon, and so. Then, what about small coronary arteries? Maybe avoid the stent, DES, because studies have shown DES still have high restenosis in a small artery. And this is the Picoleto 2. There have been other trials in the past and basically showed that drug-coated balloon is not better than DES. So DES still remain, and so it's a plus minus from the drug-coated balloon point of view, but I think it's a good device for patients who have instant restenosis. Now, we also know in the periphery arteries, PADs, and so drug-coated balloon cumulative have shown higher mortality in the PAD patients. What about the coronary? Now we have all meta-analysis, the PRISMA flow diagram, including all the trials of the drug-coated balloon, basically showed that there is no bad mortality signal in the coronaries. So it may not be that effective, but definitely there is what we saw in the peripheral arteries is not seen in the coronary arteries. Yeah. So at least this is the device. We are waiting to have it, particularly for patients with the instant restenosis and so, and has shown quite promising in maybe in some specific subset like side branch and so, where you don't want to put a stent. Then the colchicine. Colchicine is the drug which is anti-inflammatory. We are working on the statins to decrease the LDL, but many people still have an event. And we have published quite a data from Sinai that inflammation, CRP, predicts subsequent outcome. So what can you do about anti-inflammatory, the pathway? And there are many drugs. Some of them have failed actually. And colchicine, which works at various levels. As you can see at the microtubular level, at the inflammatory ribosome, and works at the neutrophil activation, platelet inhibition, IL-1B, at various places it works, and basically have shown in the earlier trial of acute MI, colchicine versus placebo on top of everything you do, that associate with a lower event rate. And it's a 0.5 milligram daily. You know the paradox is, there's no 0.5 milligram available in America. Colchicine comes only 0.6. But soon, once they change the guideline, I'm sure they will make a 0.5 milligram tablet. Right now, colchicine is 0.6 milligram, which we use for gout. So that's when you need to do, that's what you prescribe. And this is patient for the stable coronary artery disease, large number of patients, 5,000 patients. With the stable CAD, using colchicine, decrease the primary endpoint of death, MI, stroke, and ischemic-driven revascularization. So beneficial. So now we are started using colchicine in patients with management refractory angina. One signal which have been negative about colchicine is the slightly higher death rate, and that is non-cardiovascular. We still don't know the mechanism, and also it can cause some more infection. There have been some higher number of pneumonia and so with the colchicine group. And non-cardiovascular death, 1.9 versus 1.3, that has been consistent. These are the meta-analysis and basically showed decreased MI, decreased stroke, decreased revascularization, cardiovascular death is similar, and then it works basically through inflammasome activation, then neutrophil chemotaxis, and platelet interaction. So simple drug can be used. You know, one of the side effects of the colchicine is diarrhea. So make sure you tell the patient that this is expected. But good drug, and I actually start using it since this Caldo, the trial came out. I started using it, I would say, for last 5 months, maybe used in about 30 patients. Those are all continues to have chest pain after your revascularization, and with a great success, about 70% really did very good. Then what about patient with a low ejection fraction? Remember, most of the trial which has compared PCI versus CABG, ejection fraction was more than 35%. So what about patient with a low ejection fraction? We have 2 studies. One from the Ontario database, EF of less than 35%. They compare PCI versus CABG. And little bad for us that PCI did inferior to CABG. CABG is better patient with a lower ejection fraction. These are the individual endpoint. So basically, if somebody has a low EF, identical, you should move more towards the CABG compared to PCI. Second, in the left main arena, similar message from IRIS main, if your LV is mild, moderate, or normal, no difference PCI or CABG, but you have severe LV dysfunction, you have a better outcome with the CABG versus PCI. So seems to be patients with a low ejection fraction do better with the CABG, and we have to keep that in mind. There are randomized trials being planned. Point is there is no sponsor. NIH, they are applying to NIH. They ask us to participate, but we have also shown our willingness. Whether NIH will allow this trial to go forward. Alexander Lenski is heading it. Patient with a low ejection fraction, less than 35% EF, age less than 75, randomized to CABG or PCI. Whether it will ever see the daylight, I don't know. We'll see it. Then disrupt CAD, which is management of the calcific lesions. We have our known with the atherectomy, rotational, orbital. Now we have a new device called intravascular lithotripsy. And what is the intravascular lithotripsy? It is like a shock wave. Goes in, and then the shock wave basically cracks the calcium. With the idea, your subsequent balloon dilatation will open it up. We had done now, we are incorporated in our armamentarium. We did one live case yesterday, and our seen in the OCT, the cuts with using the IVL. So simple device, although expensive, that's the only issue at present because there is no reimbursement. And Disrupt CAD3 showed that overall very safe device and good success, low complication rate, less than 10%, and similar to our other new devices which have been used in this field, OA, rotational atherectomy, and so. So that is another one approved by FDA in our lab. What about various DES comparative trials? We actually have at least 12 trials because various changes occurs in the drug carrier vehicle, the pharmacological or stent design, thickness, strut configuration, and basically we are going thin, thin, thin. You see, thicker cipher, now the synergy. All keep going down. Giants are all thin struts. So that's where the field is going. So there are multiple trials which have been looked into comparative data. This was actually the using Zetrolimus, which is the Onyx and stent, basically LED and non-LED. They work equally good. Then Bionics, Nereus, many trial combo, BioResort, some plus minus, and overall message basically was that all stents seems to be equally efficacious. Another important is that if Onyx particularly, which is the Zetrolimus of Medtronic, patients who have high bleeding risk, you give 1 month of DAPT, and that lead to a similar outcome. So key is DAPT duration we can decrease. Then we publish our data at Sinai using various stents, Zion's promise of synergy, and we found the similar outcome in all cases, in complex cases, and similar stent thrombosis. So basically, what is the message? Did learn from the DS comparator trials that most of the current DS stents are equal in efficacy and safety. Thin strut DS is the way to go due to better healing and better deliverability. Biodegradable polymer seems to have no advantage over durable polymer. Actually, biggest data we have with the Zions works great. Because of rapid endothelization, there is a less DAP dependence with all the DS type. So kind of you can say all the DS equal. Then what about left main? Now we knew about the controversy of the Excel with the 5-year data, little higher mortality, although it was time dependent, that if you randomize patients with the left main, CABG or PCI, in 1 month, PCI little better, 1 month to 1 year, both equal. After 1 year, little advantage of the CABG over PCI. And there was one of the big issue, which was controversial, was the higher death rate in these patients. So they were looked into it, what was the cause. Many of them were non-cardiovascular, but whatever it is, that's what the data are. They did happen even in the non-complex left main, because we say complexity based on the syntax score. 32 and less were enrolled in the trial. More than 33 we call more complex from the syntax point of view. These were the 32 and below, randomized to CABG and PCI, and PCI using the Zion's stent. And overall, while the major outcome, death, stroke, MI were not different, but mortality, you can see, was higher in the PCI group compared to CABG. So this is where you have to understand. So these data you need to present to the patient, and then patient still make a decision. So many times it's the patient who decide what to do. You give all the data outside not on the table, after the angiogram, heart team discussion, and then let the patient decide what's the best thing for them. Now, since then, because of this mortality, lot in the news. I'm sure everybody heard about last year about this controversy. So then multiple papers have come down in terms of putting a meta-analysis, European Society of Cardiology, which is European Heart Journal, which is one of the highest impact factor in cardiology, 24 plus. And they put together the meta-analysis and of all the trials, the Noble, Excel, pre-combat, and syntax. Cardiac death, identical. MI, identical. Stroke, identical actually, because one of the trials, Noble, had a higher stroke rate with the PCI. We know that many of the trials with the PCI lower stroke rate compared to CABG, but definitely higher revascularization with the PCI, which we understand. That's okay. We know it. So we're never going to say that PCI decreased revascularization, as long as it doesn't kill people and does not cause myocardial infarction. That's the key. So therefore, we need to do better, even better than what we did in the Excel trial, to have a long-term good results. Another thing which has come up for the left main is that your volume-dependent outcome. So whether you do PCI of the left main 6 versus 40, your mortality goes down from 4.1 to 2.1, become half. So very interesting. You need to go to a center which do more left main PCIs. We do about 350 per year. Last year was a little less, but otherwise 350 unprotected left main PCIs are done at Mount Sinai for many years. Actually, this symposium, which is on 24th, the first one in 1998. Now people talk about left main PCI. 1998 live symposium, I did 3 unprotected left main That was written in the New York Times also that time. Nobody thought about doing unprotected left main PCI. Back then we did 3. Second thing came up that once you do the left main, if you do imaging, intravascular imaging, particularly I was associated with a better outcome. So that's where our lab is not big in terms of IVUS imaging, but left main routinely we image to optimize our results, which have been consistent with the data. And therefore guidelines still remain that the PCI is not a class 1, although in Europe, low syntax score is class 1, but others still remain. But complex left main, I still believe, really belongs to surgery unless there is a region that patient has so much comorbid conditions and surgeons don't want to do surgery. Then prospect to an absorb trial of the high risk plaque. The high risk plaque, basically there is a lot of data done. You do the PCI of the culprit vessel, if you image other vessels. The original prospect trial showed that you can predict which person will get into trouble in 4 or 5 years of the non-obstructive lesion. Obstructive lesion, you have fixed it. But you did imaging other vessels. So this was extension of the same. The event rate was almost 24% in the prospect trial. So now, in the second prospect 2, identification of the vulnerable plaque and patients by infrared spectroscopy, NIRS, as well as ultrasound. And this was a prospective study. And of course, basically what you do is, do the IVUS, same device, tell you about the lipid core burden index, that how much is the lipid in the plaque, because those are the one creates the trouble, cause the occlusion, cause the rupture of the plaque and so, and this was the prospect 2 design. And within there, after analysis, they did all and follows the patient, and within the whole study, they have a sub-study of the absorb. What if these high-risk plaque, which you identified, and this basically is that patient FFR is more than 0.8, but the plaque burden more than 65. What if you put absorb stent which dissolves? So this is the 2-part prospect 2 trial, and basically they found that the total MACE was 13% at 4 or 5 years of follow-up. And you look at this non-culprit lesion MACE, is majority of them, 3/4, 65% plus event occurred by the non-culprit lesion. These were the non-obstructive lesion at the baseline. Obstructive lesion got the stent, but then to follow them, they get into trouble. It's not the restenosis, it's usually the non-culprit. Now, which are the non-culprit? They identified 2 groups. Plaque burden more than 70 and the lipid index more than 324. If you have both of them, event rate is 7 times higher than if you don't have. So basically you can identify those plaques, and to have this event at follow-up lesion level MACE as very good information which we got from this trial. So the lipid core burden index, plaque burden, minimum lumen, and within there I mentioned the absorb. That do you put an absorb versus continue medical therapy in those cases, and basically showed that by putting the absorb, you have a better lumen at follow-up in these patients. And more importantly, event rate from 11% went down to 4%, became 1/3. Only unfortunate part is absorb stent is no longer available now. So it can make sense that the plaque which is going to give trouble in next 2-3 years, if you can put a very low device with a very low complication and good outcome, may stabilize that vulnerable plaque. But although p-value was just 0.1, but concept was there that yes, you non-obstructive, good FFR more than 0.8 plaque, if you can identify, you treat them, may make a difference. May make a difference because it didn't make a p-value, and more importantly, we don't have the absorb stent yet. Then the lot of data on the P2Y12 inhibitor trials. What is that? Comparing your strong antiplatelet therapy of ticagrelor or prasugrel to our old clopidogrel. Remember we did the trial, Triton and the Plato, all showed that newer agents are better than the clopidogrel. But those were the old stent designs. But what about in this day and age when stents are so good, the techniques are better. So there are multiple trials which have come in last 2 years to answer that question. This is basically comparing Alpheus trial, comparing ticagrelor versus clopidogrel, and a large number of patients. And you see basically, yes, By giving ticagrelor, you do better platelet inhibition, but outcome-wise, identical. 30 days, they will give us the data of the 1 year soon, but individual endpoints, MI, stent thrombosis, no difference. So basically, clopidogrel was good, equally effective compared to ticagrelor in this acute coronary syndrome patient. And disadvantage, little more bleeding with a ticagrelor group. So that is the biggest concern. Our concern is not MI, not stent thrombosis, it's the bleeding. So even patients with acute coronary syndrome, non-STEMI, if you think it's going to bleed, high bleeding risk, is probably the clopidogrel will be better than ticagrelor. This is one trial. Another trial is Sassikia. This is compared, basically intensified, which is using a prasugrel against clopidogrel, same different type of patients, different endpoints, but identical. 18%. These are the individual endpoint, and of course slightly higher bleeding. So key is that newer agents, while they were touted as a stronger or better agent because of low stent thrombosis, no longer true in this day and age. Clopidogrel is equally good, and if you combine both of them, this is the analysis. Then what about the old age? 75. Patient with a non-STEMI, 75, is ticagrelor better than clopidogrel? Answer that is no. Identical death, MI, stroke, rather more bleeding. So go back to clopidogrel, old drug. Another one, host-reduced polytac ACS. Remember when you do a very complicated name, the prasugrel you give 10 milligram continued, but what they did is, after 1 month, they go to 5 milligram. And guess what? Since 2013 at Mount Sinai, what we have been doing? 5 milligram. Back then, 7 years ago. Because 10 milligram caused a lot of bleeding. And this is what now the trial is showing, that compared to 10 versus 5, 5 is better. De-escalation, which we have to do. So we give 10 milligram to patients who are more than 100 kilo. Because we did platelet assay, or 4 stents and so. But otherwise 5 milligram is good enough. That is what if you want. But many of these cases, clopidogrel is equally good. Then the last and most important advance, I would say for 2020 is your DAPT duration trials. That how abbreviate you can do the duration of DAPT, Zines 2890, 1 month DAPT, TICO, and I'll just take you through. Basically, the whole idea was that can you reduce with this new stents design, they're so good. 1 month is probably a critical endothelization, then you don't need these agents. Maybe able to discontinue them, stop them, become single. And so the trial done for 1 month and 3 months, and basically showed overall global trial, particularly patients who are high bleeding risk, not all comer, high bleeding risk cases, and patients were followed. Overall showed that massive, these are, as I mentioned, criteria for high bleeding risk. Overall, as you see here, between what they did is, it was not a randomized, they just compare with the Zines v USA registry. And outcome were identical, and rather lower bleeding rate. So your individual outcomes, ischemic endpoint outcomes are lower, identical, but lower bleeding, and key is no change in stent thrombosis. So clearly you can reduce the duration. We actually have the paper from our group of the high bleeding risk with Roxana Mehran showing that bleeding risk patients are the one who give more trouble, all-cause mortality, MI is higher, so they try to avoid a stronger antiplatelet therapy on them. Then there was a trial from Korea, not the high bleeding risk, everybody. Give 1 month of DAPT or 6 to 12 months of DAPT. And basically what they found, the endpoints were identical, 1 month or 6 to 12 months, and landmark 1 month versus further, and more importantly, that it caused less bleeding. So now you can really abbreviate the duration of DAPT, and we actually change our cath reporting system now. We sometimes give 1 month, 3 months, and so on and so forth. Then the TICO trial was similar to the Twilight, which showed stop aspirin after 3 months. Similar data, same thing with acute MI as well. So now what about take away the aspirin even completely? There is a trial called ASSET Pilot, prasugrel monotherapy, no aspirin. seems to be good. So aspirin is going away from favor, and that puts our top 10 advances of 2020, and I'll sum it up now in three sentences. One, what we learned: various DES type, drug-coated balloon, left main PCI, plus minus data, some positive, some negative. IVL, high-risk plaque or NIRS, BVS for high-risk plaque, de-escalation of antiplatelet therapy, thumbs up. Imaging-guided PCI, colchicine CAD, cabbage and low EF, 2 thumbs up. And the lastly, which really made the difference, is FFR-used PCI, short DAPT, aspirin 1 to 3 months post-PCI, has really made us better interventionalists with a better outcome for our patients. We don't have the data of the 2018 because of pandemic with the New York State. The last one we had 2017. As you can see here, we continue to enjoy our superiority in terms of volume, very good safety, and now we talk about the readmissions also. Double star means statistically lower the readmission at Mount Sinai compared to the statewide average. But by and large, I just want to put this one slide to show that what is the power of medical therapy. So much introduction, many things with the statins, new guidelines, diabetes control, PCSK inhibitors, and so. What has it done? Made us better manage patient medically, with the result that you can see continuous decline in revascularization, be it PCI or cabbage over last 15 years, 40% decline, because the power of the medical therapy and so. So just to our closing slides, CCC Live. They really take pride in it. It started in July 2009, and this Tuesday was the 12th year end, 144 episodes. 1 hour, great, I would say satisfaction, with 139 countries, 35% from the USA, 15% India. Look at the per month hit. 25, 26,000, many of them even 30 plus, but 20 to 25,000 per month hit to really teach globally this field of interventional cardiology. And I'm really proud of it with my team, and of course Anu, which does all the cases and so, but putting the whole package together has been a great success. And thank you with all the cath lab attendings, besides the cath lab staff, which all there, and many of you saw in with the Beth's small video clips, and so, what we are and continue in addition to our international fellows. We really thank them for us to have this great outcome which we have, along with all the cath lab attendings and my cath lab staff. And thank you very much, and have a great day.